Okay, it's finally time for part 3 of my interview with Todd, where we really dig into my collaboration with him on Mr. Toast, and we also catch up with what he's been doing in the past 10 years in his own work, which includes a really great webcomic that he's been working on called The Poet, which is on his Instagram and you should check out. So here's the interview. I hope you like it. I'm back with Todd. We're gonna do another hour because we both like to talk.
Yes, we like talking to each other too, so it's a vicious circle.
Yes. So when we left off, you and I had connected. We're gonna work on the first Mr. Toast comic. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about working on the first Mr. Toast comic?
Well, I remember initially it was not supposed to be Mr. Toast.
See, I don't remember that at all.
And you had emailed me and said, "Would you be interested in drawing something that's not Mr. Toast?" Oh, and I said yes, of course. I said, "Whatever you make, I will draw it. Like I would like to work with you." And then you did the Mr. Toast art show, the Mr. Toast and Friends at Monkey.
Oh, at Monkey House, sure. Yeah. I did the Mr. Toast and Friends. It was an art show. You know, Monkey House was a small gallery toy store in Silver Lake, and I just invited a bunch of people to do something and send it to me, and I'd have a little section of the show with everybody I liked's work.
So I did a crayon Mr. Toast drawing of them in the woods, and then you were like, actually, what if I just did a Mr. Toast book? Would you draw it? And then I was like, heck yeah. Sign me up. And so there wasn't a script for the first comic. It was, you would send me locations and be like, draw Mr. Toast at Mount Rushmore. Draw Mr. Toast.
That was the first one, right? The Mount Rushmore, I think, was the very first drawing.
That one, and like the Great Wall of China was one of the first ones, I think. And maybe the Eiffel Tower was an early one.
Could have been.
But like, yeah, they were just these like random locations, and you're like, just draw Mr. Toast at these places. And so I did, and then you were like, okay, it's gonna be a hide and seek where he's looking for the other characters. And so I didn't know the scales of the characters in relation to each other at all. Like I only had this to go by, and this you know, like you can see Joe is smaller than Mr. Toast, but that's kind of it. Like you don't see the sizes of everybody, and like Shaky Bacon looks weird and gigantic, and I remember drawing Drunken Carrot with legs because I didn't know that he didn't have legs.
He had you put legs on Drunken Carrot in like, the issue we did never publish, yes.
Mm-hmm. And
which I thought was great.
And yeah, so then it became, you know, it was like this weird thing where you would say like, well, you have to make this character smaller, this character bigger, and I remember doing paste ups on things that I think you still ended up tweaking more to make it actually closer.
I think I didn't change much on the first issue. I don't think I changed much. You just had, I think the one thing was Shaky Bacon was very tall in the first issue, which I was like, that's funny. I think I probably just left it in there. I think most of the stuff I just left it in there. And I'd found a print. I mean, Harold wasn't doing the printing, and these were very specific size. And I found like not a print on demand, but a print place that would do 1,000 copies of a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, we just printed up the first book,
mm-hmm.
and then just kept going from there.
Was the first? Yeah, I guess we did the first two before I flew out there.
I have no idea.
I can't remember, but by then it was 2010, and I sort of throw these books to you. We start doing them. We kind of do a book a year, sort of ish. Maybe we did 2 in 1 year at one point. I don't know. I don't know. I would just sort of,
we didn't even do them necessarily for Comic-Con. I think I just sort of did them when I had
Yeah,
money or something like that, and was like, okay, let's do another book. And we ended up doing like 7 or 8 books.
7 or 8 that were printed. Yeah.
I think there were like, maybe there were 7 printed, and we did a total of 9 stories because there's 2
Yeah.
unprinted ones.
Yeah, the original issue 2 never came out. That was the
Oh, was that number 2?
Yeah, that was the talent show one, because that one's also got spotty art as
Yeah,
far as like,
Chasing Fame is number 8, but there's one issue that's not. There's a placeholder in there somewhere
okay.
because
So they
there's
were
like, so yeah, there were 9 stories. We printed 7. One of the numbers is not represented in books. No, I don't think anyone's ever asked me about that.
no. Well, the question we get is how come they're not numbered after issue 3?
It's so funny.
After issue 3, we stopped numbering them on the covers and just gave them their titles because they're all self-contained, and we didn't want people to think they had to go get all of them to make sense.
And what I loved, and wait, this was 2014. So the course of about 5 years, we did 9 of them.
Two a
What?
year-ish.
So we did about 2 a year. But the thing I loved about working with you is that I would sort of write my humor, which is, it also forced me to tell a story that goes from point A to point B. And then you would add all this great visual humor, which
super fun to do.
So I'd get the pages back and I'd look at them, and I've told people I've said this before a couple places, is I would just send you a script and it would just say a line of explanation of what's going on the page, and then a caption that's going at the bottom. And I didn't always have all the captions, and then you would basically out of whole cloth draw everything. And
yeah, which was super fun and highly unusual, probably, way to work on a book. But it was cool because it was like you gave me like a blank slate to do whatever. You're like, whatever works to tell this.
And you'd end up with panels like this, which, I mean, in a comic book, you've scaled the characters tiny, and I don't know, the pages of these books, and I was looking through my stuff the other day, and it's like, I just sort of told you that I wanted them as luchadors, and you went through and just made these great costumes that,
Taco, that was my contribution.
Yes.
That was his name, right?
Electro Taco, yes, of course, I'll never forget that. And that was always the sort of fun, we do the Twilight Zone joke, and it was always just fascinating to see, because it was like me getting to watch my characters like in a cartoon, where I sort of set up a scenario, and then they would come to life when they were in your hands.
Cool. Yeah, it was a blast to make them. Like I loved it, and I liked also like some of the later issues where, kind of how you've been helping me out with the poet stuff, where we shoot back and forth on endings and stuff, or like ways to tighten up a joke or like make something punchier. It's just so much fun working on that angle of a book, like it's kind of like the writer's room experience with just 2 people.
Yeah, and I can, it becomes collaborative, and it's like you would make suggestions and they would always be right. You never came. Well, I mean, let me rephrase that. We never got in an argument over anything. We always just sort of like tried to make the thing work the best for both of us.
In service of the book, like making a better thing, like an overall thing.
And I know for a fact that I learned how to storytell making those books, and that as artists we continuously work. We're figuring out humor, we're figuring out storytelling, we're figuring out character, and this was that magical moment where all those things blended together.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, and that it's an electric feeling.
An electric taco, you might say.
An electric taco. So then you started. So you started coming out to Comic Con in
Yeah,
I guess 2005, 2006, or no, 2009
10.
or 10.
Yeah, it might have been as early as 9, but I think it was 2010 probably was the first one that I went out with
That
you.
makes sense. Yeah, 2010 makes a lot of sense.
And then we were way back in the corner by Funko back then because you had all the figures, like the plushies and the objects, like all the trinkets and doodads and giveaways and t-shirts and stuff. So yeah.
And like that first time you came out, you sort of had an independent part of the table, as I remember. Is that how we started immediately?
Yeah, we had it was like we had a corner booth back there, and so you gave me like one quadrant of one of the sides to have my stuff, which I didn't have a whole lot back then because like we talked about earlier, like I kind of stopped producing books, and like all of my old books were out of print. And through you and my friend Matt and my friend Greg, I kind of started getting pulled back into, like, I was reminded of why I liked doing comic books, because it kind of, up until I started doing those Mr. Toast books with you, I kind of lost the joy of doing it. Like I just was like, I had stopped doing the journals, and then I saw, like all the big book publishers were snapping up everybody that I knew, but not me. And it's very exciting to watch that happen for other people, but then it's like, well, am I not good enough? And then having Nickelodeon Magazine go away and having to work at day jobs that I had no interest in doing, because at this point Harold was gone, like moved away, working he was busy saving Archie Comics was his next move. And so I was just kind of floating, like not sure what what I was spending time on, but I was drawing for myself, but I wasn't like trying to get into shows. I wasn't trying to publish anything. And so like you had asked me to do the Mr. Toast stuff, and then my friend Matt, who was a fan, him and Greg live over in Norfolk, and like they were fans of my journals, and on the internet back when I was still doing those, and they wanted to get into comics, and so they had been like, how do we get into comic books? Like, we want to start making comics.
Okay.
So I met with Greg at a Barnes and Noble cafe, and I basically told him what I would always say is like, you make stuff and give it to people, and then you're in it. It's like, make a comic book, give it to somebody, you're making comics now. And and so what they wanted to do was make an anthology, and they were like, nobody's going to want it if it's just us, because nobody knows who we are, but would you be interested in doing a comic in it, so that, because people know who you are, and maybe they'll be interested in our stuff tangentially? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'd love to do. I haven't made a comic for anybody in a long time. And that was where the Catherine Mansfield comic happened. And their book was, I found a bunch of old anthologies I did too. So this was, oh yeah, that's the book that came out of it. But this was what it was in, was Harrington Comics.
Okay.
And there's the three of us here on the back.
Nice.
And yeah, so the first 12 pages of that Catherine Mansfield are in here. I did that for them. And so then Greg started asking me to go with them to like zine festivals and stuff. And so then I was like getting a taste of it again, and like hanging out with friends and remembering why I liked doing it in the first place. And then doing the Mr. Toast stuff, and then it was like, okay, now I'm in it. Like, this is, I forgot for a minute what I loved about this. and then got pulled back in. Yeah. But I also, before we move ahead, I dug up some more oldies for you.
Uh-oh. Okay.
When I was starting out, I did, I did a bunch of anthologies and stuff, because that was the thing back then. And so, like, here's one called Bogus Dead. It's like a zombie anthology.
Okay.
It came out, and this has, I think everybody in here has done stuff. My friend Dave is on the inside, Dave Kirsch. But like Jim Moffat is in here, Tom Hart, James Kolchak, Zach Sally, Leela Corman, Gabrielle Bell, Megan Kelso. Yeah, like all of these people have done fantastic stuff. Kevin Heising is in here. Souther Salazar. Yeah, it's a crazy collection of people. Graham Annabelle's in here, like, and it's all zombie comics. Like mine is a terrible thing. If I remember correctly, it's about zombies chasing some dude, and then he gives them like sloppy joes or something, and they think it's brains, and they're happy. And where is it? I'm scared to see it, but
Uh-oh.
probably.
Danger. You're brave digging into old comics like this.
Yeah, Well, here you go. Here's a panel of them eating sloppy joes.
Okay.
And we had to do. Here's James as a zombie. Like, we all had to draw ourselves as zombies on the cover, so we're all on here somewhere. I'm sure mine is. Here's teenage Todd as a zombie.
Oh. There you are with big shoes.
And there's a music anthology.
Music Lovers Anthology.
That, like, Lucy, I can't remember her last name, Miss Nisley. She does like big. She does like graphic novels about like food and stuff now, like travel logs and stuff. But Box Brown's in here. Jeffrey Brown, the Browns, non-related. Yeah,
All those Browns.
all the Browns. But yeah, so I did a lot of stuff like this as I was starting out, like back in the day too. Like, there was one Spark Generators. This was done by Slave Labor.
Oh yeah.
Slave Labor graphics, and it was
Good
like
old slave labor.
But Donna Barr, Mark Burrier, Brian Klopper. He was at that SPX party that I talked about earlier. Bill Morrison's in here. Scott Morris, Trina Robbins, Alex Robinson, Jeff Smith, Jay Torres, and me. So yeah, it was like this weird, like getting hit up to do these things back then. So when Greg asked me to do one to help them, I was like, yeah, I haven't done an anthology book in ages. Like, why not?
Now, what project did you start working on after Catherine Mansfield?
Well, before Catherine Mansfield was Tuesday Moon and Valentine.
Oh yeah, Tuesday Moon. We didn't do Tuesday Moon at all.
Those came out. So like Goldfish and Bob was 2001, and Tuesday Moon was 2007.
Tuesday Moon.
And Tuesday. Oh, and Casual Poet was 2005. This was a collection of journals.
Now I had Casual Poet, and I don't know where mine is.
Well, I'll send you this one.
That's okay. I mean, I have one somewhere. But Tuesday Moon also is, I think, really a point where you can see your storytelling is, it's linear. It's really nice, all ages kid stuff.
Yeah,
it's about
Tuesday,
a little.
It looked like this when it came out originally.
Yeah, and then these are new ones, and it just I mean this also really sold me on your work, and then Valentine's really cute too.
And Valentine originally was like an 80-page mini comic, and then it also was like a little square book that I printed with Harold. So here's the original.
Oh, okay.
Printed one, whereas like one to a page. So like these books were reformatted in when I started bringing stuff back. So like after Mr. Toast, I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to get my books back in print and do this. Like I was like, I've had it up to here with Gap and Starbucks. Like, so I was like, I did it before, I could do it again.
Yeah, and it's really, I think it's a great testament, the design of these books is just really, really nice. I really enjoyed the design on these chance operations.
That was a very conscious thing going into it, was like, if I'm gonna start reprinting these books, I want them to be I want them to be unified in a way. And I'd been reading The Believer magazine that
Mm-hmm.
McSweeney's put out. And the thing that I loved about The Believer was they had figured out this format that all they did was change out the information. So it's like the covers were always the same, the interior layout was always the same. They just dropped in new art and text. And I was like, that is so smart to approach something that's like serious, like, a magazine format. But when I was starting these out, I was very conscious of like trying to come up with some kind of simple design that would unite everything that I did, that would make it make that it's like they're different, but they're all of a piece, like they're all a set.
Well, and I think also what I really like about these is, since they're print on demand,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, but it's like when you're working with a publisher, which of course is great and is
Mm-hmm.
certainly one of the big dreams that any artist has. They're going to have their format. You're going to tailor what you do to whatever it is that they do.
Right.
Likely, if they make 32-page kids books, you're going to do a 32-page kids book. If they make a 200-page graphic novel, you're going to do and it's going to be in this format, or whatever. You're going to be constrained in some way, but you as an artist, knowing that you're going to want to have like your Todd library,
Mm-hmm.
made a very conscious choice about making them all sort of fit into a really nice mold.
Yeah, that's something else that I really like, is a uniformity in design. So again, it makes you kind of want to have the whole set, even though the books aren't connected really. I mean, Long Pond Road that you had is going to be a series, but it's just like a catch-all. And those will have their own design. So like all of the Long Pond Roads are going to be white covers. Um, and so like they'll stand apart from the rest that way. But uh, so yeah, the size wise and the layout and like changing the colors and stuff, like that's all super super intentional.
Yeah, I think
I do it
it's
with my
it's
prints too. Like all my prints that people get they're all 4x6 to make it easy. Like there's like just a unified, so everything works together.
and that's a thing that you and I, have both sort of figured out, is since a lot of our money comes from shows and from selling actual art or prints.
Mm-hmm.
We've sort of made these sort of standardized choices that fit
Mm-hmm.
into frames, because the one thing I always love when I see you at a show is you always make these great connections with your audience.
I do.
You? Yes, yes, you
Yeah.
you are
Well,
very good with you're very attentive with your audience, and you're very, you sort of you greet them like well, tell them, let's talk a little bit about your portraiture thing too, because I think that's a really interesting
yeah,
aspect of what you do.
that 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 kind of is the thing that drives my appearances at shows. Is I should have got the sign out for this for people who haven't seen it, but like I have, over the years I've honed this thing to where I have a sign that says, I will draw you in crayon for $1 and it will be awesome. And and when I put up that sign, no matter what the event is, I end up with a line of people. Oh, as I'll draw you in crayon for $1 and it will be awesome.
Yeah,
And
you said that.
so like there's a couple of ways that happened. One is from doing comic shows with Art and Franco on the East Coast, we would do the Pittsburgh Comic Con and Orlando MegaCon down in Florida. Like Art and Franco and I would drive down to Florida and do that do that show, and and Jamie Cosley would do shows with us. We did like some of the Wizard World shows in like Philadelphia and stuff.
Oh
And
man.
but Art and Franco and Jamie and I would draw with crayons at the table for our own amusement, and
Okay.
we would tell people to like. So Art and Franco have like an encyclopedic knowledge of the superhero worlds and stuff, and so they would be like, "Tell us a superhero, and we'll draw it in, like real fast, and do that." But like, and it would, they would never be stumped. Like they would always be able to do whatever B-list, D-list character everybody names, like they would be able to do it. But on our own, we would draw like really stupid stuff just to try to make each other laugh and like come up with these really ugly characters and things. And so that's where like the crayon side came from for me. Was fun to do. And like I feel like when you're using a crayon, that fear of making a mistake is just erased because it's crayon. Like there's no stakes whatsoever with a crayon drawing. And so that, that's where I got that side from. And also where some of one of the skills that I two there's two major other things that I took from Art and Franco over the years, was speed. Like Art can draw faster than anybody I've ever met in my life. Like he will do an entire comic book in under like an hour or something. He's just like an insane madman with drawing. Like he can draw. Now they're simple like cartoony stuff, but he can just bang it out and it'll be funny and fun to look at. And so like that, going and staying at Franco's house and just like drawing, staying up and drawing with him, and like or visiting Art and drawing comics with him. It's so much fun, and it was almost like a competition to see who could draw faster all the time. It's like which one of us can knock it out. And Franco's an art teacher too, so like that's something else I didn't talk about. Was I would go to New York and be like a guest speaker at Franco's art class, and yeah. But so those guys, that, and then also I was cripplingly shy growing up. Like I was very shy, and you can't be shy at a comic book show and expect people to buy your stuff. And doing those conventions with Art and Franco, they are, loud, big, gregarious guys who will talk anybody's ear off about anything in the best way possible. And like, they would just stand there, and it's like if nobody was coming to the table, they would look out in the crowd and like see a guy with like a Spider-Man t-shirt, and they'd be like, "Hey, if you think Spider-Man's cool, you're probably gonna love what's on our table." And like the guy would be like, "Oh, I'm wearing a Spider-Man shirt," and come over. And it's like, it's basic stuff, but it, hanging out with them pulled me out of my shell and made me able to talk to people, which is like an essential skill if you're going to be behind a table for 30 hours over a 3-day weekend, where nobody knows who you are. And yeah, so that's something. So the crayons, and then being able to talk to people and being able to draw fast, those are things that all go into my dollar portraits. And then the actual dollar portraits themselves came from my music career in quotes, because I don't make a whole lot of money off of it, but I used to do it a lot. There was a couple of year period when I was touring every couple of months around the country, and on one of those tours, I ran out of merch, and I was on the West Coast. So I
Okay.
still had a half the country to go to get back home, and I didn't have anything to sell. And kind of a good problem, but also like, how are you going to make money at a show if you're not selling stuff?
Yeah.
And we were we had a house show in California somewhere, and there was like a big ream of paper and some crayons in the kitchen, and I was like, can I use this stuff? And they're like, yeah, why? And I was like, I will draw everybody here for $1. And I drew every single person at the show, like it was like a party game. And ever since that night, I have done it at every show, every comic show. since then, and that was in 2007.
Okay, so that's when
Um,
it started. Excellent.
so it started in 2007, and I still, like, if I play a show, I'll tell people before I get off the stage, come talk to me. I'll draw you for $1 if you want. And everybody thinks it's a joke until the first one gets done,
Then
and then something everybody wants. And the craziest it ever got was at San Diego Comic-Con. Uh,
yes, we started a you started a quest to try and do 1,000 of them during
a
the course of
thousand,
the show.
yeah, and since then, I pretty much have done 1,000 at that show every year alone. And like, I'll do them at Free Comic Book Day every year here, and do like 400 or 500 of them. And like, I don't know how to estimate the thousands and thousands of them that I've done over the time. Like, it's
Oh, yeah. It's a
it's
crazy amount.
so many, um, that if it makes me wish I had documented them, but at the same time, it's like, I just like that they're out there in the world, and it's like random people will follow me on social media, and they'll have one of my drawings from like 8 years ago as their profile picture or something. It's like, it's cool. But that one year at San Diego was the craziest. So, like, the first year, that I said, I was like, hey, I'm gonna try to do it, because like I think I did like 800 or something the
Yeah.
year, and I was like, I'm gonna try to knock out that extra 200 this week. And I was like, let's make it a thing and promote it. And the line got so long that we were blocking like a whole row. And I'm nobody, like, in Comic-Con, in San Diego Comic-Con, I am nobody. I'm like a speck. And the Comic-Con people came and asked if we needed to have tickets for an event. And I was like, cool, we made a dent. We made a dent in this thing.
It
And
was crazy.
ever since then, I've done at San Diego, I can safely assume I'll do 1,000 of them in a week without promoting it at all,
Yeah.
which is bonkers, because that pays for, like, that would pay for my half of the table, and like for my plane flight and stuff, just from doing those drawings. The downside is I was literally drawing for 5 days straight.
Your hand would shrivel up, but
No, my shoulder from holding the clipboard.
oh, the shoulder.
That's the thing. That's the
But
thing.
the sort of beautiful thing about it is, and it's a kind of a classic artist thing, is it's a loss leader. It's something that you're doing that is there to entice and show what, you know it gives you a connection to the audience who's standing right there in front of you. And it's, I don't know, it's always really fun to watch, how the emotional connection that is generated from this in a lot
That
of cases.
Another thing that plays into that for me personally was I love Keith Haring, and he was an artist his whole angle starting out was just bringing it to the people, like, get it outside of the gallery, get it to the public. And he would do the subway drawings and give away pins and all that stuff. And I always was looking for some way to incorporate that aspect. So, like, he's the reason why everybody always radiates when I draw them, the little lines around him, because he's radiating his baby drawing. So that's my thing that I appropriated from Keith, was that. So that's always my little nod to him, is everybody's glowing.
Cool.
Also, it cheers them up when they see it, because everybody's like, oh, I'm glowing. So it's like an instant thing that everybody likes themselves too, to an extent. So it's like, it works on that level, where it's like we all like when we're recognized. So, like, to have somebody at an event like that, like, focus on you for a minute versus you fanboying out on everybody, probably on some psychological level plays into the whole thing. So it works in a lot of ways, and for me, it makes the shows more interesting, because I can talk to people more than just being like, please buy something.
Yes.
Like, the big deal is, like, you want people to buy your stuff, but I don't want to just be there begging people to give me money to buy stuff. Like, I would like them to come over and enjoy themselves, and maybe get to know something about them or whatever. And there's people that would come every day, like all 3 days, all 5 days at these events. They'll come every day in their different costume and get drawn every day.
That's
Uh,
what I
every
always
year.
I always love about my little drawings, because I have them where you can flip through them, and
Mm-hmm.
you sort of force the person to interact. It's like,
Yeah,
you
my
know,
friends do that too. It's like a record bin where it's like once something's in their hands, they're more prone to take it home too, which is like a basic sales tactic. But not a lot of people do it at comic shows, you know.
no. And I mean, yeah, just that sort of tactile interaction where people, just are sort of looking for what it is that, and
For
if
them,
the
yeah,
stuff is diverse enough, it keeps them, they're like, oh, now I have to go, like when you're shopping at the used record store, you
exactly.
start at A and you have to go through the entire. When I used to buy records,
Yeah,
you have to do it all. You have no
yeah. Because what
choice.
if there's something there that you miss? It's like you don't want to miss it.
Yeah, you don't want
There's
to miss it.
gold in them hills.
And that's the other thing with art is, they're always looking for that reflection of themselves, where it's like they
Hmm.
see themselves in it, which I think is really interesting.
And that's part of where like the pop culture prints come into it for me is that's like people look for stuff that they know already. And so that's like that'll get them in. They'll be like, "Oh, I can't believe you drew this movie that I love and I don't think anybody else likes. What else do you have?" And then they'll, maybe look at one of my original things.
And they're all, yeah, I mean, yeah. And that's the thing about it as an artist is you can't expect everybody to care exactly about what it is you're doing. So
Hmm.
it's nicer to sort of shepherd them in.
And those pop culture things came as a direct result of San Diego,
Oh, really?
um, because of Jensen. Because all roads lead to Jensen on
All
on
roads
your
to lead to
channel.
Justin. There's some truth to that.
So like, um, I had done so like the drawings that you were buying, like the little $5 crayon things on. Sorry, let me get comfortable in this chair. Um, I started like I would just draw stuff that I wanted to draw, and eventually I started doing drawings of other artists that I liked, like Andy Warhol and Keith Haring and stuff, and then some authors and stuff, and um, and then I started doing some movie pictures, and I love Wes Anderson movies. And the second year I did San Diego with you, I
Okay.
I came up. That was the year that the Gallery 1988 was doing the Breaking Bad coasters,
Okay.
and that was like a promotional thing, and they had like a scavenger hunt, and our table was one of the locations to come get them.
I think there was like a time and people just,
Yeah,
so it's like Jensen gave them out at one time. And so
they
they
were
would just,
scattered around the show, so people had to go at a certain time to a certain booth and either get what
yeah.
was there or then know where to go to the next thing. And we were one of the
So,
spots, and I didn't know Gallery 1988, and I didn't know who Jensen was. But I remember you saying like, "Hey, this guy from the gallery is going to come over here at some point. Like, let me know when he gets here if I don't see him, because we got to figure out how we're going to do this, because our table's going to get crazy for like an hour."
yeah, there
Which
was
it
like, we knew it was going to blow up for like just an hour or whatever. And it was like, it would be there, it'd be done. That would be it.
right. And so he came over and talked to you about the time that and what we were going to have to do to hand out stuff. And when he was leaving, he saw my little Wes Anderson drawings and was
Oh,
like, um, do you do stuff for any like art shows or stuff?" And I was like, "I can." And he was like, "You should send me some of these. I've got a gallery. I'll put them in." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then he left. And then you were like, "Do you know what just happened?" And I'm like, "No." And so he had invited me to do Crazy for Cult, which is like their biggest show.
yeah.
That that is, some people try real hard to get into, and Jensen was just like, "You should send me some of these. I'll put them in the show." And and so I went home, and he's like, "You're gonna send him drawings." And I was like, "Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
so
gonna."
I
Yeah,
was like, you're doing this.
yeah. And I was like, I was gonna do it anyway, but yes, I'll make sure. I will make sure to do it. And I did some Rushmore drawings or something for that first one that I was in, and all four of them sold on the opening night of the show, and I've been at Gallery 88 ever since. So that and because of that, And because of the way they do those themed shows, I was creating more and more pop culture artwork. And then I started to do ones that I just wanted to draw once I realized people would buy it from me. And I was trying to work my way back out of having a day job and to do art full time. And I found out that that was a way to monetize artwork, was to draw movies and stuff that I was a fan of, and then the other fans of those things would support that, and then again, hopefully support my weird comics output and weird music at the same time. Yeah, so I started taking very deliberate efforts when I was at my last day job at Starbucks to meet these. My thing was like every day I had to do one thing that would get me closer to not having to be at Starbucks.
Oh, okay.
And it was this very intentional thing, and it didn't have to be a big thing, but I had to make sure every day I did one thing. Like, it could have just been posting something online, or like renovating a website, or like getting labels made, or stickers, or something. Some tiny thing had to be done that would be moving me towards the goal of like having my books back in print, making new work, and not having to work at Starbucks. And like one of the shifts that happened was I've never been a morning person. I like, especially when I was younger, I would stay up all night long and work on my stuff in like the wee hours of the morning. And one of the things that I found that helped me get over that feeling that lots of us, like creative people doing different things, like when you've got a day job, you feel like they're stealing the best hours of your day. It's like
Sure.
they're taking all my energy and time that I should be putting on this other stuff. And then you get home and you feel guilty because you're like, I just want to sit on the couch and not do anything, but I should be doing this. And so I started trying to do my work in the morning before I went to do my shift, which I
Okay.
hated. I hate, just like at the gas station, I hated getting up early. But it's like I would get up an hour earlier and do a drawing or do a post or do something, and then go to work and be like, well, they can't steal my time because I already did my goal for the day. And then I was able to shift it around to being like, yeah, what can I do with this time? Like, since I have to be here, how can I make this environment better? And try to help my coworkers have a better day, or help the people that are horrible because they haven't had their coffee yet, and it's like a way of shifting it off of yourself that helps, by shifting it away from yourself, it helps yourself get through it easier too. So like that was a big personal shift of that, and like slowly but surely I worked up to where, and I did all the math, and I was like, I have to make this much money on average to equal what I'm making here, and it's not a lot. I live very cheaply, and my wife and I are both like frugal with our spending, so our rent's not a lot. Like, our overhead's very low, so it's like I literally would like just try to figure out what's the bare minimum that I need to be able to make it worth it, and eventually was able to switch back to doing it full time, and that was 5 years ago.
About 5 years now.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So what next? What are you working on now, and where do you see it going?
Well, with the current state of affairs, who knows? Who knows? I in I have I have a loose game plan of projects that I want to do. And I've tried. Another change is I used to work on like a million things at once, and I try really hard to single task as much as possible.
Huh. Okay.
Although during lockdown, I gave myself 3 daily projects for the first 100 days, and that was a bit taxing. So I think 2 is my maximum. So I've got my Daily Beliefs project that's ongoing on Instagram, which is just a video of stuff that happens every day, and I do a little ambient score for it. That's just to keep myself using all of my gear when I'm not having time to work on actual music.
Yeah, people have to realize you have a whole sort of secondary music career that you've been pursuing.
Yeah,
You've toured.
I've got
You
vinyl
put
records,
You've
CDs,
got
and
vinyl
tour.
records,
Yeah,
CDs. You're on
many.
So
Yeah,
we're gonna table all that just
yeah.
because that's
It's
another two
crazy.
hours of stuff.
But yeah, so the daily bleeps is an ongoing thing, and then I was doing I revived my journals for the first 100 days of lockdown. That I ended that for various reasons, and I feel like it did good. And so like that's going to go in the next issue of Long Pond Road, which it originally wasn't. It didn't exist, so it wasn't going to go in there. So Long Pond Road is my one-man anthology. That's like my catch-all book for. So the first issue has like odds and ends from the past decade that didn't really have a home.
And another fun thing you do is you sort of give an explanation that talks about these projects.
Oh, because they're
And
so different and scattered
yeah,
throughout time. So it's like I felt like they needed to have some kind of reason for being.
and I mean it's and it started kind of. I mean, with me, this book, which I love to death, um, it's it's transcending comics in a way because it's comics that are also dealing with art and art practice. And I'm a comic guy. I love comics, but the idea of approaching comics from the standpoint of looking at artists, interacting with artists, that you have your chance operations, which is based on the work of John Cage. I mean, I can't think of anyone else that does anything close to this.
Cool.
No, I mean, and I think it's very impressive, and it's something that, I mean, I think
Well,
you'll get feedback on that at
those
some point where people will
those
be.
the comics about other creators came from the tail end of the original run of my journals. So like my journal comics I did from 2000 to 2012, off and on. It was never like there's only a couple of years in there where I did every single day, and it was basically a way to practice and try to get better and make sure that I made something every day. And it was I've talked about this in other places. Again, this is a thing that like I always get thrown in with James Kolchaka because his big thing was the sketchbook diaries, like American Elf. And the difference between James and I with those is they started around the same time. His was an inspiration for mine. It wasn't American Elf yet. He had just done like an 8-page mini comic where he chronicled a San Diego Comic Con, and I was like, "That's a good idea."
Oh, okay.
Um, and then I had Scott Dickers from The Onion had Jim's Journal, which was like a fake diary comic strip about a guy named Jim who didn't do anything. Like it was just like he would sit around with his cat or like, go grocery shopping, and they were like non-joke jokes. And I loved Jim's Journal, and so like those two things, I was like, well, that's a great idea to do something and get better. And whereas James is like that's like his magnum opus, like that's his is actual art with a capital A. My journals was like a playground that was just practice, and the old ones are really hard to look at. What I I think his
Well,
sketchbook diaries are awesome, but
and that's fine, but there's sketchbook diaries, so
but
they're
they're the thing with journals is they're accumulative, and he
yeah.
never missed a day, and he did it for like 14 years or something. So that's 14 years of human life in comics form. Um, and he's he had kids and they grew up, and like it's just neat. It's something singular, and so there's a we draw alike, so we get compared to each other. We both became known around the same time, so we get compared to each other. I did a journal comic after his journal comic, but our art is very different. Like our actual like what we do is could not be more different. And
Yes.
so but I will say like big thing is his sketchbook diaries. My journal is not my big thing, and it was never intended to be my big thing. It was practice. And so
Sure.
mine always changed forms. So it's like when it started out, it looked kind of like his because I was doing the 4 square thing. And then it became an elongated rectangle thing with like ruled borders, and the art got better because I was improving as a drafts person. Like it was more like practice for that, like getting better.
Yeah, sure.
And then it turned into like one panel a day sketchy things, because it's like then I didn't care about, I was like, well, how can I get it in directly in ink and just get faster and more proficient. And towards the end of that, coming back to the comics about people, was like the big 12 panel versions.
12 panel versions.
These are what's in that Long Pond
Oh,
Road
yeah,
#1.
okay.
So like I would draw like a 1-page strip that instead of it being directly a journal, it became more of like an emotional journal. And so this was during that weird period when it's like comics were like all of my income sources from comics were going away. I was losing more time to having to survive, like just pay bills and like survive and stuff.
Yeah.
So I started going back to using stand-ins for myself, like my robot. Instead of drawing me, I would draw the robot, where I would draw the mummy, or a little ghost. Like here's one with the mummy. And so this was, like the Mummy's comics were about like fleeting joy, like these short little moments of, so like he blew the dandelion and he was happy, and then it's gone and he's sad again. Or he'd like throw leaves up in there and be happy, and then he'd be sad again. The robot ones were about, enjoying like nature, like getting outside, because like, technology, nature makes sense. So the robot would be like at the beach.
It's so funny because your progression is in some ways similar to mine. I started with, it's completely different, but every artist sort of goes through that thing. I started with single panels with captions. Then in that comic, I added a second panel, and I remember the very first time I wanted to do I needed to do a backup in one of the books, and I did they were little 4-panel things, and it was,
Mm-hmm.
like one of them's like, I think basically it's Mr. Toast has a balloon. He then gives it to Joe, and then Joe smiles.
Right.
That's it. It's like,
Right.
but you're understanding storytelling.
It's a micro story. It's like,
Yes.
yeah. And so then I started using other like historical
Ah,
figures.
okay.
So
Sure.
I did like, here's Kafka, and then he turns into the bug and he's writing, and he's,
Sure.
all of this text is actual stuff from his diaries, but it's stuff that mirrored what I was feeling when I drew this. So it's
Mm.
like my journal, but it's Kafka, and like I did Rimbaud, uh, as here's another Kafka one. There's Mummy and Ghost. Here's
And I
Alan.
mean, I think,
So this is what started me down that path of doing the stuff with other artists, was ways of engaging with what I was going through, but connecting with other artists that were inspiring to me. So it was like digging through their personal writings as opposed to just their published output, and finding what resonated with me and what I was going through, and then using them as stand-ins. And so that led to like the Catherine Mansfield stuff and the John Cage stuff, and now it's Ray Johnson, and the Poet was going to be one of those too. So like the Poet is my current daily comic strip, which brings us back to the beginning of what I initially wanted to do when I was a kid. And I know that the Poet's going to be a book ultimately. Like it's not meant to be an ongoing daily comic strip, although I feel like it could be. Like if I wanted to do it, I feel like it has enough legs to stand on that it could just keep going. But
you could do it forever if you were, if you
yeah,
were so inclined and you had the time and energy. Yeah.
yeah, and which is mind-boggling to me, because it was, it was going to be my next. So like that Georgia O'Keeffe comic in Long Pond Road that you had, was going to be a book called Georgia in the Desert. And it was going to be a comic about Georgia O'Keeffe walking around in the desert collecting bones to paint. Because I think that she's an interesting individual. And also, there's like all of the photos of her that aren't by Alfred Stieglitz are by Todd Webb, the photographer. So he's the other Todd Webb on Google. It's like me and Todd Webb, the photographer, because he was famous, like a famous artist. And so he took pictures of Georgia O'Keeffe. So I was like, I should do a comic about Georgia O'Keeffe because it would just confuse the internet more. And so that was going to be a whole book, and it ended up being a short comic for a magazine, for a kids magazine called Illustoria. And but so like that was going to be one, and then I was going to do the Ray Johnson comic about him as a rabbit and use his letters. And then I was going to do one about a poet named Robert Lax. Yes, Ray Johnson. So Robert Lax was going to be the next person that I started channeling through their letters and diaries and trying to make a little comic about them, because he was this poet from America, but he lived most of his life in Greece on Patmos, hanging out by the water, watching the fishermen and writing these little short poems. And so like I was trying to figure out ways to draw him, and I was never happy with it. And I went through all kinds of different iterations. and like he was in Greece on an island, so I would have had to draw the ocean all the time. And like there were all the pictures that I could find of him, he was surrounded by like feral cats and stuff, because I guess there were just always cats running around. So I was going to have him and like a couple of cats at the ocean, and he would be talking to the ocean a lot, and like maybe the cats would be smart alecky or whatever. But I was like, there's too many comics about cats. I don't want to try to design a new cartoon cat. Like that's an insane task. But I do like drawing birds, and our new project has a bird in it, which is something else that's in the pipeline. But I was like, what if I drew like a seagull at the beach instead? And then I did that, and then I was like, but I don't like drawing the beach because it's too blank. Like there's nothing to root you in a space, like, and I don't want to have the ocean behind him all the time, or like have to find ways to draw the ocean. So there were these like technical problems. And so I was like, well, what if it's a pigeon instead of a seagull, and he's at a park, and because like people go to the park to write, like why not? And then I started thinking about it like a play. Like it's like, okay, so the set pieces, so it's like there'll be a tree, there'll be a park bench, there'll be a little pond. That's your setting. And then you've got your poet comes to write, and then the pigeon's there to beg for crumbs, and the poet can just be my channel for all the art stuff that I'm interested in talking about, and the pigeon can be the back of my brain being like, you're so full of it, and so it stopped being about a specific poet and just became all poets, and that's where that sucker came from.
And I think this is probably a good place to end, because I think that sort of says it all. You started sort of in this place where you were just trying to make comics, and then you're sort of doing journal comics, and you're trying to figure out humor, and then you're also trying to mix in the art, and now you've sort of had this perfect blend where it's it's those two sort of push and pull things working inside you, where it's like it's funny, but it's also about how important that poetry and that simplicity and that comic, like what a comic strip is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. It is. The poet's been surprising me every day in a way that's I'm really enjoying, because like it doesn't feel like work. Like there are times when it's like I'm struggling to try to connect the dots, and it's also a project that's worked in my love of using the chance procedures from chance operations and found sources, because I have this notebook that's full of all of the when I started it. So writing for you is the easy part. Writing for me is the hard part. So I don't like I
You know, it
I don't
varies.
like. I mean, like there's cartoonists that it's like drawing is the the easier part, and right, like sometimes it works together. Like I do find if I'm writing stuff, I kind of have to draw stuff too. Um,
Sure.
but like uh, I didn't want to start blank every day, so I started accumulating random texts and sentences and overheard scraps and things that would pop into my head. You know this already, but
Yeah,
uh,
no, I think it's I think it's really an interesting strategy to approach all of this stuff. And and strategies and artwork are always amazing. I mean, important, I think.
but yeah, it's helped me immensely to be able to like open up this thing, and I write them all on sticky notes, and I'll just they're randomly thrown in here. So when I get new ones, I just put them in a spot that's empty, so that they're always
It's
these
always
juxtapositions that can spark some kind of thought process, or like something that is unintentionally funny that I can then riff on for a couple of strips. And then when I started it out, I would thumbnail them on the sticky notes too, and do like I don't know if you
back it
can.
up a little. Yeah, that's good.
Um, and so then it's like I could rearrange them or change things really on the fly. But it's like it's a way of starting from from a from a blank slate that has stuff underneath it. It's like you can wipe away a little bit.
Sure.
There's oh cool, I can riff on that, or like I can extend on that idea, or like wouldn't it be funny if this happens after that? And so I'm constantly throwing stuff in that notebook as fodder. And so the strip has been a nice like amalgamation of um, things that have been previously said or written or overheard, along with just original
And
thoughts and
that's
ideas and jokes and
that's the way all artists work, is accumulating
mhm.
stories and then figuring out how to work it all in there and make a thing that can emotionally connect somehow.
Yep. And it's weird and small, and that's the things that I like.
Well, thank you, Todd,
Thank
for
you.
spending this time with us. Little dog came back in right at the end.
Little
She
baby
misses
dog.
you.
I miss you, baby.
We're in the midst of COVID, so we might not see each other this year, but hopefully next year
Next
things
year,
can
WonderCon
start.
happens again.
If WonderCon happens again,
Comic shows are a thing in the future, then we'll do those and have more
we can
books.
do. Yeah, and we'll talk about our secret project another day
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at length. But thanks for being on here.
Yeah,
It's
thanks
good
for having me.
good stuff, man. And
Thanks.
I'll see you later.
All right.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for spending 3 hours talking about your life. I think there's a lot of great insight about being an artist in those 3 hours, and what it takes to sort of be that independent artist that's always out there day in, day out, creating and sort of trying to put it out there in the world and have the world pay some amount of attention. So thanks for doing this. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. Always happy to answer questions in the comments, and check out my other videos for more interesting interviews and other stuff about Mr. Toast and other shows that I might be inclined to do. Goodbye.